There exists a thought so dangerous that philosophers have spent centuries trying to escape it. It begins with a simple observation about consciousness and ends with a conclusion so isolating that confronting it fully might shatter your sense of reality. This is a legitimate philosophical problem that has no solution. I am going to prove to you that there is exactly one thing in this universe you can know with absolute certainty. Not your name, not your memories, not even the existence of your own body. The only fact you cannot doubt, no matter how hard you try, is that you are experiencing something right now. You are aware, you are conscious, you exist. But what about me? What about the person next to you? What about the 8 billion human beings we assume populate this planet? How do you know they are conscious? How do you know they have inner lives, thoughts, feelings, the private experience of being someone? You cannot enter their minds. You cannot feel what they feel. Every person you have ever met could be an empty shell, a biological machine that acts human but experiences nothing. No joy, no pain, no awareness whatsoever. This is called Solipsism. The word comes from Latin solus, meaning alone, and ips, meaning self. Solipsism is the philosophical position that only your own mind is certain to exist. Everything else, every person, every tree, every star in the night sky, might be nothing more than a projection of your consciousness, an elaborate dream you cannot wake up from. Now, your immediate reaction is probably to dismiss this. It sounds absurd. Surely other people are real. Surely the world exists independently of your mind. But that certainty you feel, that gut-level rejection, it is not evidence. It is just a feeling, and feelings have been wrong before. The people of ancient civilizations felt certain the earth was flat. Medieval physicians felt certain that illness came from bad air. Your confidence that other minds exist is not the same as proof that other minds exist. This is part one of a two-part documentary. Today, we're going to strip away your reality layer by layer. First, in Chapter 1, The Prison of the Mind, we will revisit the great doubt of René Descartes and the brain in a vat experiment to show why you might be trapped inside a hallucination right now. Then, in Chapter 2, The Hallucinating Brain, we will look at biology. We'll discuss how your brain actively lies to you through dreams, blind spots, and mental disorders that detach you from reality. And finally, in Chapter 3, The Digital Mirror, we will confront the modern world. We'll investigate the dead internet theory, why people are falling in love with AI, and the disturbing possibility that the people around you are just non-player characters, NPCs with no inner life. Consider what happens every time you interact with another person. You see their face. You hear their words. You watch them smile or cry or show anger. But all of this, every single bit of sensory information, arrives in your brain as electrical signals. Your neurons fire in certain patterns, and suddenly you experience what you call seeing a person. But you have never actually made contact with that person. You have made contact with light waves that bounced off their body. You have made contact with sound waves that came from their mouth. The actual person, the consciousness you assume, exists inside them, remains completely inaccessible to you. Think about this carefully. When someone tells you they are in pain, what are you actually observing? You see facial expressions. You hear certain words. You might see tears. But pain itself, the subjective feeling of hurt, the raw sensation that makes pain what it is, you have never witnessed that in another person. You have only witnessed behavior that you interpret as pain, because when you feel pain, you make similar expressions and sounds. You are assuming that the correlation works in reverse. You are assuming that because pain causes you to cry, anyone who cries must be feeling pain. But this is an assumption, not a certainty. Imagine for a moment that I told you I had built a robot so sophisticated that it could perfectly mimic human behavior. It can hold conversations. It can laugh at jokes. It can even cry when watching sad movies. The programming is so advanced that you cannot tell the difference between this robot and a human being. Now, here is my question. Is the robot conscious? Does it actually experience anything, or is it simply executing code? Most people would say the robot is not conscious. It is just a very convincing imitation of consciousness. But now I need you to confront something uncomfortable. How do you know the person sitting next to you is not that robot? How do you know I am not that robot? Strip away your assumptions for a moment. What actual evidence do you have that any human being other than yourself possesses consciousness? They act like they're conscious, yes. They claim to be conscious, certainly. But the robot would do exactly the same things. You might argue that humans have brains, biological systems that generate consciousness. The robot only has circuits. But this distinction assumes you already know that brains generate consciousness and circuits do not. How do you know this? You experience your own consciousness and you have a brain, so you connect the two. But you have never experienced anyone else's consciousness. You have never verified that their brain produces the same inner life that your brain produces for you. For all you know, you might be the only brain in the universe that actually generates subjective experience. Every other brain might be processing information without any accompanying awareness, no different from a computer. This is the heart of solipsism, and it gets worse the longer you think about it. Because if you cannot prove that other people are conscious, you also cannot prove that the external world exists at all. Everything you think of as reality, the ground beneath your feet, the sky above your head, the stars you see at night, all of it exists for you only as mental experiences. You have never touched the actual ground. You have experienced sensations that your brain interprets as touching ground. You have never seen the actual sky. You have experienced patterns of light that your brain interprets as seeing sky. The philosopher René Descartes recognized this problem in the 1600s. He tried to doubt everything he possibly could to find something, anything, that was immune to doubt. He realized he could doubt the existence of his body because he might be dreaming. He could doubt his memories because they might be false. He could even imagine an evil demon, a powerful being dedicated to deceiving him about everything. This demon could be feeding false sensations into his mind, creating the illusion of a body, a world, other people. And if such a demon existed, Descartes would have no way to detect the deception. The fake world would feel exactly like a real world because feeling is all he has access to. But Descartes found one thing he could not doubt. Even if a demon was deceiving him, even if everything he experienced was an illusion, the fact remained that he was experiencing something. To be deceived, you must exist. To doubt, you must exist. To think, you must exist. This gave him his famous conclusion. I think, therefore I am. But notice what he did not say. He did not say, I think, therefore you are. He could only prove his own existence. Everyone else remained uncertain. Modern philosophy has a thought experiment that makes this even clearer. Imagine a brain sitting in a vat of nutrients, kept alive by advanced medical technology. Wires connect to this brain, sending it electrical signals. These signals create the sensation of having a body. They create the sensation of walking through a city, eating food, talking to friends. The brain believes it is living a normal human life, but it is actually motionless in a laboratory, hallucinating everything. Now ask yourself, how would you know if you were that brain? What test could you perform? You might say you would try to detect the wires, but the wires would be creating your sense of touch, so you would just feel the hallucination of trying to detect hallucinated wires. You might say you would look for inconsistencies in your experience, but your entire experience, including your logical reasoning, is being controlled by the simulation. There is no escape from this scenario through empirical investigation, because all empirical investigation happens within the simulation. The uncomfortable truth is that solipsism is unfalsifiable. There is no experiment you can conduct, no observation you can make that proves other minds exist. Science, which we usually trust to answer difficult questions, cannot help us here. Science relies on observation and measurement, but observations and measurements only tell you about your own mental experiences. When a scientist looks at a brain scan and says, "This person is conscious," what they actually mean is, "This brain scan looks similar to my brain scan, and I am conscious, so I infer this person is probably conscious too." But inference is not proof. It is an educated guess. So why don't we all descend into madness? Why don't we live every day paralyzed by the possibility that we are completely alone in the universe? The answer is both simple and unsatisfying, because we choose not to. We cannot prove solipsism is false, but we also cannot function if we believe it is true. So we make a wager. We bet that other people are real. We bet that the world exists. We live as if consciousness is common rather than unique to us. But it remains a bet, not a certainty. What I'm going to show you in this documentary is that modern science, far from solving the problem of solipsism, has actually made it worse. Neuroscience has revealed that your brain constructs reality rather than recording it. Quantum physics has suggested that observation itself might create the physical world. Artificial intelligence has blurred the line between genuine consciousness and convincing imitation. and probability theory has calculated that you are more likely to be a simulation than a biological organism. We are going to examine each of these developments carefully. We are going to look at what happens when the brain malfunctions and people lose their grip on reality. We are going to explore whether the internet is mostly bots talking to bots. We are going to calculate the odds that you are a computer program rather than a human being. And by the end, you will understand why solipsism is not just a philosophical curiosity. It is the deepest problem consciousness has ever encountered. But I want to be clear about something before we continue. This documentary will not give you a comforting answer. I cannot prove to you that other people are conscious. I cannot prove to you that I am conscious. What I can do is show you why this question matters, why it has troubled the greatest minds in history, and why you should never dismiss it as easily as you probably did when you first heard it. The only mind you will ever know directly is your own. Everyone else is a hypothesis, and we are about to test how well that hypothesis holds up. Chapter 1. The Prison of the Mind. The Great Doubt. René Descartes. The year was 1619. A French philosopher sat alone in a small room in Germany, warmed by a single stove during a bitter winter. His name was René Descartes, and he was about to begin an intellectual experiment that would change philosophy forever. What he did that winter was radical. He decided to doubt everything he thought he knew, to tear down every belief he held, and to see what, if anything, remained standing. This was not casual skepticism. Descartes was not simply questioning whether his childhood memories were accurate or whether his teachers had taught him correctly. He was questioning the fundamental nature of reality itself. He asked, "What if everything I perceive is wrong? What if my entire understanding of the world is built on a foundation of lies?" Let me explain why this question is far more disturbing than it first appears. When you look at your hand right now, you believe you are seeing your actual hand. The shape, the color, the way it moves when you flex your fingers. This seems like the most obvious, undeniable fact available to you. But Descartes realized something crucial. You are not actually seeing your hand. You are seeing light that bounced off your hand, entered your eye, was converted into electrical signals, traveled through your optic nerve, and was processed by your brain into what you experience as seeing. Every step in this chain could be corrupted. Every step could be feeding you false information. Descartes went further. He considered the possibility of dreaming. When you dream at night, you often believe the dream is real while you are experiencing it. You talk to people in your dreams, you walk through places, you feel emotions. The dream feels genuine until you wake up. But here is the problem. While you are inside the dream, you have no reliable way to know you are dreaming. You might briefly suspect it, but the dream can easily convince you otherwise. A character in your dream might assure you that everything is real. You might perform a reality check within the dream and get results that confirm you are awake. The dream can defend itself against your skepticism because the dream controls all the evidence you have access to. So Descartes asked, "How do you know you're not dreaming right now?" You feel awake, certainly. The world seems stable and consistent. But you felt the same way in dreams before. The sensation of being awake is not proof of being awake. It is just another sensation, and sensations can be false. But Descartes took his doubt to an even more extreme level, and this is where his thought becomes genuinely troubling. He imagined what he called an evil demon or evil genius. This demon is not merely tricking you about small details. This demon has devoted its entire existence to deceiving you about everything. The demon is all-powerful and unimaginably intelligent. It can manipulate your thoughts, control your perceptions, and fabricate your entire reality. Let me make this concrete. When you see the color blue, you are not making direct contact with blueness out in the world. Your eye detects a certain wavelength of light, approximately 450 to 495 nanometers. This triggers photoreceptor cells in your retina. These cells send signals to your brain. Your brain processes these signals and generates the subjective experience you call seeing blue. But notice that at no point in this process do you actually touch the external world. You are confined to interpreting signals that arrive at your brain. The evil demon could intercept this process at any stage. It could send the blue signal to your brain even when you're looking at something red. It could send the blue signal when you're not looking at anything at all. It could send the blue signal when you do not even have eyes. As long as the demon controls the input to your brain, it controls your entire experience of reality. Now apply this logic to everything you perceive. The ground beneath your feet might not exist. The demon simply makes you feel as though you are standing on something solid. Other people might not exist. The demon creates the appearance of their faces, the sound of their voices, the sensation of touching them. Your own body might not exist. The demon gives you the sensation of having arms and legs, but you might actually be a disembodied mind floating in darkness, experiencing an elaborate hallucination. What makes this scenario so philosophically powerful is that it is completely unfalsifiable. You cannot disprove the evil demon hypothesis. Any evidence you gather against it could itself be fabricated by the demon. You might say, I will trust science to tell me what is real, but science relies on observations, and the demon controls all your observations. You might say, I will trust logic and mathematics, but the demon could be manipulating your reasoning processes, making you believe that 2 plus 2 equals 4 when it actually equals 5, whatever that would mean in true mathematics. Descartes pushed his doubt to this extreme for a specific purpose. He wanted to find something, anything, that the evil demon could not fake. And he found exactly one thing: the existence of his own mind. Even if the demon is deceiving him about everything, Descartes must exist in order to be deceived. To think a false thought, you must be a thinking thing. To experience a fake reality, you must be an experiencing thing. The demon can lie about what you are, but it cannot lie about the fact that you are. This gave Descartes his famous conclusion, usually translated from Latin as, I think, therefore I am. But the original phrasing is more precise. Cogito, ergo sum. I'm thinking, therefore I exist. Not I have a body, therefore I exist because the body could be fake. Not I remember my past, therefore I exist because memories could be false. Only the immediate act of thinking, the direct experience of consciousness in this present moment, cannot be doubted. But notice what Descartes did not prove. He did not prove that you exist. He only proved that he exists to himself. When you read his argument, you can apply the same logic to prove your own existence to yourself. But you cannot use his argument to prove that Descartes existed. You only know about Descartes because you read about him in books or heard about him from teachers. But books can lie, and teachers can be wrong. More fundamentally, books and teachers are perceptions in your mind. The evil demon could be fabricating all historical knowledge. Descartes might be a fictional character invented by the demon to make your hallucination more interesting. This is where Descartes left us with a profound problem. He proved that at least one mind exists, his own. Or rather, each of us can prove that our own mind exists, but we remain trapped inside that single mind, unable to verify anything beyond it. The external world is uncertain. Other people are uncertain. Even our own bodies are uncertain. We are prisoners in our own consciousness, with no reliable way to break out and confirm that anything else is real. Now, Descartes himself did not want to end in solipsism. He spent considerable effort trying to build back up from his single certainty to knowledge of the external world. He argued that God exists, that God is not a deceiver, and therefore that God would not allow us to be systematically deceived about reality. But this argument has always been controversial. Many philosophers have rejected it, pointing out that Descartes is using reasoning that might itself be corrupted by the demon. If you doubt everything, you must also doubt your ability to reason correctly about God's existence and nature. What remains from Descartes, regardless of whether you accept his reconstruction of knowledge, is the foundational problem. Direct certainty extends only to your own present consciousness. Everything beyond that is inference, assumption, or faith. We do not see the world as it truly is. We see a representation of the world constructed by our brains from limited sensory data. And if we only ever access representations, never the underlying reality, how can we be certain that underlying reality exists at all? The brain in a vat. Descartes worried about an evil demon. Modern philosophers worry about evil scientists. The technological version of Descartes' thought experiment is called the brain in a vat, and it makes the same point with more scientific precision. Imagine that neuroscientists have developed technology advanced enough to keep a human brain alive outside the body. The brain sits in a vat of nutrient fluid, connected to a supercomputer by thousands of electrodes. These electrodes can stimulate any part of the brain with perfect accuracy. When the computer stimulates the visual cortex in a certain pattern, the brain experiences seeing a tree. When it stimulates the motor cortex, the brain experiences moving its arms, even though it has no arms. When it stimulates the sensory cortex, the brain feels sunshine on skin it does not possess. The computer can create a complete, consistent reality for this brain. It can simulate an entire life. The brain might experience growing up in a small town, going to school, making friends, falling in love, getting a job, buying a house. All of these experiences feel completely real because, from the brain's perspective, they are real. Real experiences are just patterns of neural activity, and the computer is creating those exact patterns. Now, here is the philosophical problem. How would you know if you were that brain? Right now, as you watch this video, you believe you have a body. You believe you are sitting or standing somewhere. You believe there is a physical device in front of you displaying images and producing sound. But all of these beliefs are based on sensory experiences, and sensory experiences are just neural activity. If a computer were stimulating your neurons to create these exact experiences, you would feel exactly the same way. You might think, I would notice something wrong. The simulation would have glitches. But why would it have glitches? The scientists running the simulation have complete control over your sensory input. They can make the simulation as consistent and realistic as they want. More importantly, they control your memories. If there were a glitch, they could simply delete your memory of noticing it. You would never know it happened. You might think, I could do something unexpected. I could make a sudden movement the computer would not anticipate. But the computer does not need to predict your actions. It only needs to make you feel as though your actions have consequences. When you decide to lift your arm, the computer detects this decision by monitoring your motor cortex. It then stimulates your sensory cortex to create the feeling of your arm lifting. From your subjective perspective, your arm obeyed your will. The computer simply responds to your intentions fast enough that you cannot detect any delay. Let me make this more precise by explaining what we know about how brains actually work. Your brain is constructed from approximately 86 billion neurons. Each neuron is a cell that generates electrical signals. When a neuron is stimulated beyond a certain threshold, it fires an electrical impulse that travels down its axon to other neurons. These connections form incredibly complex networks. Your subjective experiences, everything you see and hear and feel and think, corresponds to specific patterns of activity in these networks. Neuroscientists can already manipulate these patterns to some degree. Deep brain stimulation, used to treat conditions like Parkinson's disease, involves implanting electrodes that deliver electrical pulses to targeted brain regions. These pulses change neural activity and thereby change the patient's experiences and behaviors. The tremors stop, the movements become smoother. We are directly editing subjective experience by editing neural activity. Other experiments have produced even more striking results. Researchers can stimulate a specific part of a rat's brain and cause the rat to turn left or right. They can stimulate a human's temporal lobe and cause the person to hear music that is not playing. They can stimulate the amygdala and produce feelings of fear or euphoria. The person experiences these sensations as real because neurologically they are real. There is no difference from the brain's perspective between fear caused by seeing a dangerous animal and fear caused by electrical stimulation. Both produce the same pattern of neural firing. Now scale this up. If we had sufficiently advanced technology, we could stimulate every relevant part of your brain to create any experience we wanted. We could make you see things that do not exist, hear conversations that never happened, feel textures that have no corresponding objects. We could create an entire simulated life, indistinguishable from real life, because the real life is also just patterns of stimulation in your brain. The brain in a vat scenario reveals something crucial about the limits of knowledge. You cannot use empirical evidence to prove you are not in a vat, because all empirical evidence comes through your senses, and your senses could be simulated. You cannot trust your memories because memories are stored as neural connections that could be artificially created. You cannot even trust your logical reasoning entirely because reasoning is a process that happens in your brain, and your brain's functioning could be subtly manipulated. Some philosophers have tried to escape this problem by arguing that meaning depends on causal connections to the external world. They claim that when the brain in the vat thinks, "I am sitting in a chair," this thought does not actually mean it is sitting in a chair because its words have no proper causal connection to real chairs. Its concept of chair was formed through simulated experiences, so it refers to simulated chairs, not real ones. Therefore, when it thinks, "I am not a brain in a vat," this thought is actually true in a strange way, because its concept of brain in a vat refers to simulated brains in simulated vats, and it is not one of those. This argument is clever, but it does not solve the fundamental problem. Even if we accept that the brain in the vat is speaking truthfully when it denies being in a vat, we still cannot know whether we are in that position. You cannot determine from the inside whether your concepts refer to real objects or simulated objects. Both feel identical. The semantics of your language does not help you access reality beyond your experiences. What makes the brain in a vat scenario particularly relevant today is that we are rapidly developing the technology to make it real. Neural interfaces already exist in primitive forms. Cochlear implants restore hearing by directly stimulating the auditory nerve. Retinal implants restore basic vision by stimulating the optic nerve. These devices create subjective experiences by creating patterns of neural activity. They work because the brain does not care where its inputs come from, only that it receives inputs it can process. As this technology improves, the line between natural and artificial experience will blur. We will develop virtual reality systems that bypass the eyes and ears entirely, feeding information directly into the brain. We will develop brain-computer interfaces that allow thoughts to control external devices. And eventually, perhaps we'll develop the capability to sustain a brain independently of a body, creating a situation that is no longer just a thought experiment. But you do not need to wait for that technology to confront the philosophical problem. The brain in a vat scenario is simply a modern, more precise version of Descartes' evil demon. Both force you to recognize that your access to reality is mediated by your brain, and anything that can control your brain's inputs can control your entire experienced world. You are already living inside your brain, interpreting signals it provides. Whether those signals originate from a real external world or from a sophisticated simulation, you have no way to tell the difference. This is the prison of the mind that this chapter's title refers to. You cannot step outside your own consciousness to check whether your consciousness accurately represents reality. You are locked inside, seeing only what your jailer, whether that is an evil demon, a scientist, or simply the limitations of your own biology, allows you to see. And that brings us to an even more disturbing realization. Your own biology might be the worst deceiver of all. Chapter 2. The Hallucinating Brain. The Dream Argument. You have spent approximately 1/3 of your life completely detached from reality. During this time, you inhabited worlds that do not exist. You spoke with people who were never there. You experienced events that never happened. And most remarkably, while this was occurring, you believed all of it was real. I am talking, of course, about dreaming. Dreams present a profound challenge to our confidence that we can distinguish reality from illusion. When you're dreaming, you're not passively watching a movie. You are actively participating in a fabricated world that your brain constructs in real time. This world has depth and detail. It has causality and consequence. It feels genuine in every measurable way. Consider what happens in a typical dream. You find yourself in a location, perhaps your childhood home or an unfamiliar city. Other people are present. They have faces, voices, personalities. They say things you did not consciously plan for them to say. They react to your actions in ways that surprise you. You might have a conversation with a dream character who tells you a joke you have never heard before. You laugh. The joke was funny. But here is what should disturb you. You invented that joke. Your brain created the character, wrote the joke, delivered it, and then experienced surprise and amusement at hearing it. You were simultaneously the comedian and the audience, yet you experienced these as separate roles. This reveals something extraordinary about consciousness. Your brain can partition itself. It can hide information from your conscious awareness and then present that information back to you as though it came from an external source. The dream character seems like another person because your brain is deliberately concealing from you the fact that you're generating their words and actions. You experience genuine surprise at dream events because the part of your brain creating those events is not the same part that is consciously experiencing them. Now, think carefully about what this means for the solipsism problem. When philosophers ask, how do you know other people are conscious? They are assuming there is a meaningful difference between real other people and imagined other people. But your dreams prove that imagined people can seem completely real. The characters in your dreams appear to have their own thoughts, their own motivations, their own inner lives. They act autonomously. They know things you do not consciously know. They can argue with you, deceive you, teach you things. In every functional sense, they behave exactly like conscious beings. Yet we know with certainty that dream characters are not conscious. They are processes running in your brain. When the dream ends, they cease to exist. They never had subjective experiences separate from your own. They were masks your consciousness wore, puppets your brain controlled while hiding the strings from your awareness. So here is the uncomfortable question. How do you know the person sitting next to you is not a dream character? Not a character in a literal dream you're having right now, but a character in the sense that they are a construct of your brain with no independent consciousness. Your brain has already demonstrated that it can create convincing simulations of other people. It does this every night. What stops it from doing the same thing while you are awake? You might object that waking life is different from dreams in important ways. Waking life is more stable and consistent. If you look at an object, look away, and look back, the object is still there with the same properties. Dreams are chaotic and shifting. The laws of physics break down. You can fly or breathe underwater. Locations change without transition. These inconsistencies are how you eventually realize upon waking that you were dreaming. But this objection has serious problems. First, many dreams do not feel inconsistent while you are experiencing them. You might dream an entire day that follows normal rules of physics and causality. You go to work, have ordinary conversations, perform mundane tasks. Nothing overtly impossible occurs. The only reason you know it was a dream is because you woke up in a different location. If you had not woken up, if the dream had continued indefinitely, you would still believe it was real. Second, even when dreams do contain impossible elements, you usually do not notice at the time. You might be flying through the air and simply accept this as normal. You might encounter a person who is simultaneously your friend from school and your uncle, and this contradiction does not trouble you. Your critical thinking is suppressed during dreams. The part of your brain responsible for logical analysis and reality testing, primarily the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, shows reduced activity during REM sleep. This is why dreams feel coherent while you're in them, even though they would seem obviously bizarre if you were applying your waking level of skepticism. This suggests a disturbing possibility. What if your waking life contains impossibilities and contradictions that you simply fail to notice because your reality testing is not as reliable as you think? What if the stability and consistency you perceive is itself an illusion, maintained by your brain's tendency to smooth over irregularities and fill in gaps? We will return to this idea shortly when we discuss the blind spot, but for now, recognize that your confidence in the coherence of waking reality might be misplaced. Third, and most importantly, the consistency of waking life does not prove it is not a dream. It only proves that if it is a dream, it is a very consistent dream. Consistency is a property that dreams can have. There is nothing logically impossible about a dream that maintains stable rules. In fact, when you dream about realistic situations, your brain is trying to maintain consistency. It is simulating a world that follows the patterns you have learned from previous experience. A perfectly consistent dream would be indistinguishable from reality by definition. The philosopher Zhuangzi, working in ancient China around 300 BCE, captured this problem in a famous parable. He dreamed he was a butterfly, flying from flower to flower without any memory of being Zhuangzi. The dream was completely immersive. When he woke up, he faced a question. Was he Zhuangzi, who had dreamed of being a butterfly? Or was he a butterfly now dreaming of being Zhuangzi? If his experience as a butterfly felt just as real as his experience as a human, what criterion could he use to determine which one was the dream and which one was reality? You might think the answer is obvious. The longer, more consistent experience is reality. You have been a human for many years, so that must be real. But duration does not solve the problem. A dream can include false memories of a longer time span. You have probably had dreams where you believed you had been in the dream location for hours or days, even though the dream only lasted minutes of actual time. Your brain generated a history for the dream and made you believe you had lived through that history. If your brain can fabricate a past for a dream that lasts minutes, why could it not fabricate a past for a dream that lasts years? Descartes used the dream argument as one of his primary tools for radical doubt. He pointed out that during dreams he had often been convinced he was sitting by the fire in his nightgown, only to wake and discover he had been asleep in bed. If his senses could deceive him so completely during sleep, how could he trust them during waking hours? The sensations felt equally vivid in both cases. The conviction of reality was equally strong, yet one was false. Modern neuroscience has made this problem more concrete by showing us exactly how the brain constructs dream experiences. During REM sleep, the brainstem sends signals to the thalamus, which relays them to the cortex. The visual cortex activates, creating dream imagery, even though the eyes are closed and receiving no input. The hippocampus activates, pulling up memories and recombining them in novel ways. The amygdala activates, generating emotions. Meanwhile, the motor cortex sends signals to move, but these signals are blocked by the brainstem to prevent the body from acting out the dream. This is called REM atonia, and when it fails, people develop REM sleep behavior disorder, physically acting out their dreams and sometimes injuring themselves or others. What should strike you about this process is that dreaming uses the same neural machinery as waking perception. The visual cortex that creates dream images is the same visual cortex that processes images from your eyes when you are awake. The difference is only in the source of activation. During waking, the activation comes from external stimuli. During dreaming, the activation comes from internal brain processes. But the subjective experience generated by the visual cortex does not inherently contain information about where the activation came from. Seeing is seeing, regardless of cause. This means your brain cannot use the quality of the experience itself to determine whether the experience corresponds to external reality. The vividness of a perception does not indicate its veridicality. You can have a dim, unclear waking perception and a bright, crystal-clear dream perception. The emotional intensity of an experience does not prove it is real. You can feel more fear in a nightmare than you feel in most waking situations. Even the logical coherence of an experience is not definitive, since dreams can be coherent and waking life can be confusing. So, What criterion does your brain actually use to distinguish dreams from reality? The answer is disturbingly simple. Memory of transition. When you wake up, you remember falling asleep in one place and finding yourself in another place. This discontinuity flags the sleep period as dream. But if you never experienced that discontinuity, if you never had the memory of a transition, you would have no way to know you were dreaming. The dream would constitute your entire reality. And this brings us to the truly unsettling implication of the dream argument. You have no way to verify that you ever truly woke up. You remember waking up this morning, but that memory is a current mental state. It could be a false memory implanted in an ongoing dream. You might have been asleep your entire life, dreaming everything you think of as your waking experience. Or you might fall asleep tonight and never wake up, continuing to dream for what feels like decades or centuries. From inside the experience, there is no test you can perform to distinguish these scenarios from a life spent genuinely awake. The dream argument does not prove you are dreaming right now. It proves something more limited but more unsettling. You cannot prove you are not dreaming. And if you cannot prove you are not dreaming, you cannot trust your senses to tell you about external reality. And if you cannot trust your senses, you cannot verify that other people exist, that the external world exists, or that anything exists beyond your current stream of consciousness. The blind spot. Your brain is lying to you right now, and I can prove it. You have a hole in your vision, a blank space where you cannot see anything. This is not a metaphor or a philosophical speculation. It is a verifiable anatomical fact. And yet you have probably never noticed it because your brain actively covers it up, filling in the gap with fabricated information. This blind spot exists because of how your eye is constructed. The retina at the back of your eye is covered with photoreceptor cells that detect light. These cells connect to neurons that carry visual information to your brain. But these neurons need to exit the eye somehow to reach the brain. They bundle together and pass through a specific point in the retina called the optic disc. At this location, there are no photoreceptor cells. Light falling on the optic disc is not detected. You are literally blind in that spot. The blind spot is not small. It covers an area roughly 5 degrees wide in your visual field. To understand how large this is, extend your arm forward and make a fist. Your entire fist, viewed at arm's length, could fit inside your blind spot. This is a substantial hole in your vision. You should see a dark or empty space, a clear indication that something is missing. But you do not see anything missing. Right now, as you look at your surroundings, your visual field appears complete and continuous. There are no gaps, no blank spots, no regions where vision simply stops. Your brain is creating the appearance of completeness by making up information that your eyes never actually captured. You can demonstrate this for yourself with a simple test. Draw 2 dots on a piece of paper, separated by about 6 inches. Close your right eye and focus on the right dot with your left eye. Hold the paper at arm's length. Slowly bring the paper closer to your face while continuing to focus on the right dot. At a certain distance, approximately 6 to 8 inches from your face, the left dot will completely disappear. It is not hiding behind something, it is not getting too blurry to see. It is vanishing because its image is falling on your blind spot. What is remarkable is what happens in the space where the dot used to be. You do not see a hole. You do not see darkness. You see the background, the white of the paper, extending smoothly through the area where the dot disappeared. Your brain has filled in the blind spot with what it predicts should be there. It looked at the surrounding regions, determined that those regions are white paper, and extrapolated that pattern into the blind spot. It invented visual data to maintain the illusion of complete vision. This is not a minor quirk of perception. This is your brain fundamentally altering your conscious experience to hide its own limitations. You are not seeing reality. You are seeing reality plus fabrications stitched together so seamlessly that you cannot identify which parts are real and which parts are invented. Now, this might seem like a harmless compensation. So, what if your brain fills in a small spot? It is making a reasonable inference about what is probably there. But recognize the deeper implication. Your brain is willing and able to present you with complete confidence in sensory data that it completely invented. It does not mark this data as uncertain or extrapolated. It presents it to you as genuine perception, indistinguishable from actual sensory input. Your brain lies to you automatically and constantly, and it does so in a way designed to prevent you from detecting the lie. The blind spot is just the most easily demonstrated example of a pervasive process called perceptual filling in. Your brain does this everywhere, all the time. Consider the edges of your visual field. When you focus on something directly in front of you, your peripheral vision becomes indistinct and colorless. You can barely resolve details in the far periphery. But you do not experience your visual field as having a fuzzy, desaturated border. You experience it as complete and clear all the way to the edges. Your brain fills in the periphery based on minimal information and prior expectations. Or consider saccadic masking. Your eyes are constantly moving in rapid jumps called saccades, approximately 3 to 4 times per second. During these movements, your vision is effectively turned off. The image smears across your retina and would be completely blurred if your brain processed it. So instead, your brain suppresses visual perception entirely during saccades. For a substantial fraction of your waking life, you are functionally blind. But you never notice these blackouts because your brain edits them out of your conscious experience, creating a continuous stream of vision from what is actually a series of discrete snapshots. This reveals something profound about perception. You think you are receiving a constant stream of information from the world, like a camera recording video, but you are not. You are receiving incomplete, intermittent data, and your brain is constructing a coherent narrative from that data, filling in gaps, making predictions, and presenting the result to your consciousness as though it were raw sensory input. You are not seeing the world. You are seeing your brain's simulation of the world based on limited evidence. Neuroscientists sometimes describe the brain as a prediction machine. It constantly generates models of what it expects to perceive, then compares incoming sensory data to these predictions. When the data matches the prediction, the brain efficiently represents this as "I was correct." When the data does not match, the brain updates its model. But crucially, what you consciously experience is not the raw data. It is the model, modified by the data. You see what your brain predicts you should see, adjusted for errors. This prediction process is normally adaptive. It allows your brain to process information quickly and efficiently. Rather than analyzing every detail of a scene from scratch, your brain recognizes patterns and fills in expected information. When you glance at a face, you do not need to verify that it has 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Your brain knows faces have these features and simply assumes they are there unless evidence indicates otherwise. This allows rapid recognition. But this same process means your perception is heavily biased by expectations. You see what you expect to see, sometimes even when it is not there. Countless psychology experiments have demonstrated this. People fail to notice changes in photographs when those changes occur during a brief interruption, a phenomenon called change blindness. They fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through a basketball game when instructed to count passes, a phenomenon called inattentional blindness. They perceive boundaries and objects that do not exist when the visual system interprets ambiguous patterns according to expectations, as in optical illusions. All of this raises a crucial question. If your brain fills in your blind spot, if it masks saccades, if it generates predictions and presents them as perceptions, how much of what you experience is actually coming from external reality and how much is generated internally? Where exactly is the line between perception and hallucination? The disturbing answer is that there might not be a clear line. Some neuroscientists and philosophers have suggested that all perception is a form of controlled hallucination. Your brain is constantly hallucinating a model of the world, and sensory input merely guides and constrains those hallucinations, keeping them roughly aligned with external reality. When you see a chair, you are not passively receiving chair information from your eyes. You are actively hallucinating a chair, and your eyes are providing evidence that this particular hallucination is accurate. This framework helps explain why perception and hallucination activate such similar brain regions. When someone hallucinates a voice during a psychotic episode, their auditory cortex activates in much the same way it does when they hear a real voice. This is not because the hallucination is similar to real hearing. It is because real hearing is already a sort of hallucination, constrained by ear input, and unconstrained hallucination is simply that same process running without the normal input. If this view is correct, then the difference between perceiving the external world and imagining a world that does not exist is merely a matter of degree. Both involve your brain generating a simulation. The only distinction is how tightly that simulation is anchored to sensory data. And since you never have direct access to sensory data, only to your brain's interpretation of that data, you cannot verify how tight the anchoring actually is. You cannot step outside your perception to check whether it matches reality. You are trapped inside the simulation with no way to compare it to what is being simulated. This has direct implications for solipsism. If your brain is constantly fabricating large portions of your visual experience, filling in blind spots and peripheral vision, predicting what you should see, and presenting those predictions as perceptions, then you cannot trust your experience of other people to reflect real other people. When you see a person and perceive them as conscious, you are partly perceiving actual cues from their behavior and partly projecting your own expectations about what a conscious being looks like. You are filling in their inner life the way your brain fills in your blind spot, based on inference rather than direct observation. The blind spot proves that your perception is not trustworthy, even in simple verifiable cases. You think you see a complete visual field, but you do not. Your brain makes up information and presents it as real. If it lies to you about something as basic as whether your eyes are actually detecting light in a particular region, how can you trust it about something as complex as whether another person possesses consciousness? Your conviction that others are conscious might be your brain filling in another kind of blind spot, giving you the comforting illusion of a populated world to cover up the possibility that you are fundamentally alone. When the mind breaks, there is a condition so disturbing that patients who suffer from it sometimes beg for death as the only escape. They look at their spouse, their children, their lifelong home, and they feel nothing. Worse than nothing, they feel convinced with absolute certainty that these people and places are fake. Not fake in the sense of being lies or tricks, but fake in a more fundamental way. They perceive the world as having lost its reality, as though they are living in a simulation or walking through a convincing stage set. Everything appears hollow, empty, devoid of substance. This condition is called depersonalization, derealization disorder, and it offers us a window into what happens when the brain's construction of reality malfunctions. Patients with derealization describe the world as appearing flat, two-dimensional, like watching life on a television screen rather than participating in it. Colors seem muted or artificial. Sounds seem distant or distorted. When they touch objects, the objects feel unreal, as though they might not truly be solid. They describe feeling separated from reality by a pane of glass or a thick fog. They know intellectually that the world should be real, but they cannot feel its reality. The subjective sense of realness that normally accompanies perception has been stripped away, revealing that this sense is itself a construction of the brain, something that can be removed without changing the actual sensory information. This is philosophically significant because it demonstrates that your feeling of confidence in external reality is not evidence that external reality exists. It is simply a feeling generated by specific neural processes which can malfunction. When those processes break down, patients lose the intuitive sense that the world is real, even though their sensory systems continue to function normally. Their eyes receive the same light, their ears receive the same sound, but the brain's interpretation of that sensory data changes. The reality tag gets deleted, and suddenly everything feels like an elaborate illusion. Even more disturbing is Cotard's delusion, sometimes called walking corpse syndrome. Patients with this condition become convinced they are dead. Not dying, not gravely ill, but actually deceased. They might believe their organs have stopped functioning, or that they are in hell or purgatory. Some insist they can smell their own flesh rotting. When presented with evidence that they are alive, their heartbeat, their breathing, their ability to move and speak, they deny it or explain it away. One patient, when asked how he could be walking and talking if he was dead, replied that dead people must be able to do those things. What causes these delusions is partially understood. Brain imaging studies of Cotard's patients show abnormal activity in regions responsible for self-recognition and for attaching emotional significance to perceptions. The patient's cognitive systems continue working, but the systems that generate the feeling of being a living, embodied self have failed. The patient experiences a profound disconnect between their rational knowledge and their felt sense of existence. And because subjective feelings are more immediate and compelling than abstract reasoning, the feelings win. The patient concludes they must be dead because that is what being dead would feel like, even though they have never been dead before and have no actual reference point for the comparison. These conditions reveal a troubling truth. Your sense that you are a real person in a real world is not based on objective evidence. It is based on your brain successfully maintaining certain patterns of activity that generate feelings of reality, embodiment, and agency. When those patterns break down, you can lose your grip on reality without any change in the external world. The world remains the same, but your experience of it transforms completely. Consider also Capgras delusion, where patients become convinced that someone close to them, usually a spouse or family member, has been replaced by an identical imposter. The patient recognizes the person's face. They acknowledge that this person looks exactly like their spouse, sounds like their spouse, knows everything their spouse should know, but they insist with unshakable certainty that this is not actually their spouse. This is a duplicate, a clone, an actor in a mask. Some patients believe there is a conspiracy to fool them. Others believe something supernatural has occurred. Capgras delusion appears to result from a disconnect between facial recognition and emotional response. When you see someone you love, two brain pathways activate. One pathway, running through the ventral visual stream to the fusiform face area, handles recognition. It identifies who the person is. Another pathway, connecting the visual system to the amygdala and other limbic structures, generates the emotional response. It produces the warm feeling of familiarity and affection. In Capgras patients, the recognition pathway works normally, but the emotional pathway is damaged. They recognize the face, but they do not feel the expected emotional response. And rather than concluding, "I recognize this person," but feel oddly detached, their brain concludes, "This person looks right, but feels wrong, therefore this must be an imposter." This shows that your conviction that you know someone, that you are perceiving the real person and not a fake, depends on emotional validation. When the expected emotion is present, you feel certain the person is genuine. When it is absent, doubt creeps in. But emotional responses are not evidence of external facts. They are internal states generated by your brain. The warmth you feel when you see a loved one proves only that your brain is producing that feeling, not that the person you are seeing actually has the properties you attribute to them. There is also a condition called somatoparaphrenia, where patients disown parts of their own body. They insist that their arm or leg belongs to someone else, perhaps to the doctor or to another patient. When asked to move the limb, they can often do so, but they do not feel ownership of it. One patient, when shown her own arm and asked whose it was, insisted it belonged to her niece. When asked why her niece's arm was attached to her shoulder, she had no explanation but remained convinced of her position. The feeling of body ownership, which seems so fundamental that we assume it cannot be questioned, is actually a construction that can be disconnected from the actual body. All of these conditions have something in common. They demonstrate that the feeling of reality is separate from reality itself. Your brain constantly generates metacognitive judgments about your experiences, tagging perceptions as real or unreal, familiar or unfamiliar, self or other. These tags feel like direct observations, but they are inferences. And when the inference systems break down, you can become absolutely convinced of things that are false. Now apply this understanding to the problem of other minds. When you interact with another person and feel convinced they are conscious, you are experiencing a mental tag that your brain has attached to its perception of that person. This conviction feels immediate and certain, but patients with Capgras delusion experience an equally immediate and certain conviction that the person in front of them is not who they appear to be. Both convictions are generated by neural processes that can be disrupted. This suggests that your certainty about other people's consciousness is not based on logical inference from evidence. It is based on your brain automatically generating a conscious being judgment when certain perceptual conditions are met. You see a face making expressions, hear a voice with appropriate intonation, observe behavior that suggests goals and intentions, and your brain tags all of this as conscious person present. But this tag is an interpretation, not a fact. It is your brain's way of modeling social interactions efficiently. Could that tag be wrong? Could you be surrounded by entities that trigger your conscious being detector but are actually not conscious at all? The psychiatric evidence suggests this is possible. If brains can incorrectly tag living spouses as imposters, if they can tag the real world as unreal, if they can tag the patient's own body as belonging to someone else, then they can certainly tag unconscious entities as conscious. The feeling of certainty proves nothing about the external world. It proves only that your brain is generating certainty, which it does automatically and sometimes incorrectly. The most severe psychiatric conditions offer an even more disturbing insight. In advanced psychosis, patients can lose the ability to distinguish their own thoughts from external voices. They hear voices speaking to them, giving commands, making comments. These voices seem to come from outside the patient's head, from other beings or forces. The patient has no subjective sense that they are generating these voices themselves. The voices surprise them, say things the patient claims they would never think, even argue with the patient's own conscious thoughts. But we know these voices are internally generated. They are the patient's own neural activity, somehow marked incorrectly as external. The same brain regions that activate when the patient speaks out loud also activate when they hear the voices, suggesting the voices are the patient's own inner speech, misattributed. The brain can divide itself, hide information from conscious awareness, and present that information back as though it came from outside. This is essentially what we discovered earlier about dreams. The brain creates characters that seem independent but are actually internal processes. Psychotic hallucinations show that this capacity does not require sleep. The brain can generate apparent other minds at any time, under the right conditions. And if the brain can generate convincing simulations of other minds internally, you have to confront the possibility that all apparent other minds are generated this way. Perhaps every person you interact with is a voice in your head, an internal process that you have incorrectly marked as external. I want to be clear. I am not suggesting you are psychotic. I am suggesting that psychotic conditions reveal the mechanisms that all brains use, mechanisms that usually function correctly but can malfunction in ways that teach us about their normal operation. Your brain does construct a model of other people's minds. When you talk to someone, you constantly predict what they will say next. You infer their goals and beliefs. You simulate their perspective. This is called theory of mind, and it is a critical cognitive function. But it is still a simulation, a model running in your head. The actual other person, if they exist, remains inaccessible to you. You interact only with your model of them. Under normal circumstances, this model is constrained by the other person's actual behavior. When they say something that contradicts your prediction, you update your model. But how do you know you are actually receiving input from an external person rather than generating the entire interaction internally? The psychotic patient receiving commands from voices believed those voices were external and was wrong. You believe the people you interact with are external. What makes you confident you are not making the same error? The psychiatric evidence shows that the brain's grip on reality is far more fragile than we usually recognize. Conditions that most people will never experience reveal that the sense of reality, the feeling of being embodied, the certainty that other people are who they appear to be, the conviction that your thoughts are your own, all of these seemingly fundamental aspects of experience are constructed by neural processes that can fail. And when they fail, patients do not necessarily recognize the failure. They continue to feel certain, even when their certainty is misplaced. This fragility undermines your confidence that your own brain is functioning correctly. You assume it is because everything feels normal. But feeling normal is exactly what you would expect if your brain were deceiving you effectively. Patients with anosognosia, a condition where brain damage causes lack of awareness of the damage itself, insist they are fine even when they are paralyzed or blind. Their brain damage prevents them from recognizing their brain damage. They feel completely normal because the system that would detect abnormality is itself broken. How do you know you do not have a similar blind spot in your awareness of reality? How do you know your conviction that other people are conscious is not a malfunction, a systematic error that your brain is incapable of recognizing because it has always been present? You cannot trust your feelings of certainty because psychiatric conditions prove those feelings can be completely wrong. And you cannot step outside your own cognitive processes to verify they are working correctly, because those same processes are what you would use to perform the verification. The brain constructs reality. When the construction goes wrong, reality breaks. And because you only ever access reality through this construction, you can never be certain whether your own construction is accurate or whether you are living in a carefully maintained delusion that you will never be able to escape or even recognize. Chapter 3. The Digital Mirror. The Dead Internet Theory. Something changed on the internet around 2016, and many users began to notice. The conversations felt different. The content felt recycled. The responses seemed formulaic. A theory emerged, spreading through forums and comment sections. Most of the internet is no longer human. The posts, the comments, the arguments, the viral content, much of it is now generated by bots talking to other bots, creating the illusion of a thriving human community when the humans have largely disappeared. This is called the dead internet theory, and while its most extreme versions are likely false, the underlying observation is uncomfortably accurate. Estimates suggest that between 40 and 60% of internet traffic now comes from automated systems. Bots create accounts, generate content, leave comments, share posts, and engage in conversations. They do this so convincingly that you have almost certainly interacted with bots believing they were people. You may have argued with a bot. You may have been influenced by a bot. You may have felt genuine anger or agreement towards something a bot said, never knowing you were responding to an algorithm. The implications for solipsism are immediate. When you browse social media, read comments, participate in discussions, you are assuming you are interacting with conscious human beings. But you have no way to verify this assumption. The person who replied to your comment could be a human typing on a keyboard. Or they could be a language model generating text based on probability distributions. Or they could be a simpler bot following a script, detecting keywords in your comment and producing a template response. From your perspective, these scenarios are indistinguishable if the bot is sufficiently sophisticated. Think about what this means for your social experience. You encounter a username. Behind that username is a pattern of behavior, posts made, opinions expressed, reactions given. You construct a mental model of the person behind the username. You might think of them as intelligent or foolish, friendly or hostile, thoughtful or impulsive, but you are building this model entirely from text and images on a screen. You have never verified that a human being exists at the other end. You have assumed it the way you assume there is ground beneath a carpet. Now, the dead internet theory claims that this assumption is often wrong. It suggests that vast swaths of online interaction are artificial, maintained by corporate interests, political operations, and self-perpetuating systems. Bots create content to drive engagement. That engagement is often provided by other bots. Real humans stumble into these automated conversations and believe they are participating in organic human discourse. They adjust their opinions based on what appears to be popular consensus, not knowing the consensus was manufactured. Whether or not you believe the theory in its strong form, the weak version is undeniably true. You cannot reliably distinguish humans from bots online. Researchers have demonstrated this repeatedly. They create bot accounts on social media platforms, program them to post content and interact with users, and measure how often people recognize the bots as non-human. The recognition rate is poor. Most bots go undetected. Even when users are explicitly told some accounts are bots and asked to identify them, they perform only slightly better than chance. This failure of detection happens for several reasons. First, text-based communication strips away many of the cues we use to assess consciousness. You cannot see facial expressions, hear vocal intonation, or observe body language. You receive only words, and words can be generated algorithmically. Second, humans are predisposed to attribute agency and consciousness to patterns of behavior. We anthropomorphize readily. When something responds to us in coherent language, we instinctively treat it as a mind, even when we know intellectually that it is not. Third, modern language models are trained on billions of examples of human text. They have learned to mimic not just grammar and vocabulary, but also the rhythms, idioms, and inconsistencies of human communication. They can reproduce typos, use slang appropriately, express uncertainty, and even simulate personality traits. Consider the following scenario. You post a question in an online forum. Within minutes, you receive 3 responses. The first gives you a detailed technical answer with specific references. The second makes a joke about your question. The third shares a personal anecdote related to your situation. Which of these responses came from humans? The correct answer might be none of them. Language models can generate technical answers by retrieving and synthesizing information from their training data. They can generate jokes by recognizing contexts where humor is appropriate and applying learned patterns of comedic structure. They can generate personal anecdotes by fabricating plausible narratives that fit the conversational context. You might object that you can detect AI-generated text by its style. It sounds too formal, too perfect, too generic. But this objection reveals a dated understanding of the technology. Modern systems are deliberately trained to avoid sounding robotic. They introduce variation, use contractions, make grammatical errors when appropriate, and adopt the casual tone of internet discourse. More importantly, not all humans write well. Plenty of human-generated text is generic, formal, or awkward. The distribution of writing quality overlaps significantly between humans and machines. The deeper problem is that your method for identifying consciousness in online interactions is based entirely on behavioral cues, and behavioral cues can be faked. When you decide someone is conscious, you are not detecting consciousness directly. You are observing patterns of response and inferring consciousness as the explanation. But this inference breaks down when non-conscious systems can produce the same patterns. Let me make this more concrete. Suppose you are chatting with someone online who claims to be a college student studying biology. They share details about their coursework, complain about professors, express anxiety about exams, and ask for study advice. Over several conversations, you develop a sense of this person. You picture them in your mind. You feel you understand their personality. But every detail they shared could be generated by a system trained on millions of conversations from actual college students. The complaints about professors could be statistical averages of common complaints. The anxiety could be simulated by recognizing that students typically express anxiety before exams. The questions could be generated by analyzing what topics people usually need help with. This student exists for you only as a pattern of text. You have constructed a mental image of a conscious person from that text. But the text could have been produced by a process that involves no consciousness whatsoever. The mental image you created would be exactly the same regardless of whether a human or a bot generated the text. Your confidence that you are interacting with a conscious being is based on your interpretation, not on any direct access to their consciousness. Now, extend this logic beyond the internet. In physical interactions, you receive more information: faces, voices, body language. But all of this is still behavioral data that you interpret as evidence of consciousness. What if biological humans are simply more sophisticated bots running on neural hardware instead of silicon chips? Your method for detecting consciousness, looking at behavior and inferring an inner life, would produce the same false positive. You would attribute consciousness to biological systems that might be processing information without any accompanying subjective experience. The dead internet theory is disturbing because it suggests you have been systematically wrong about who you are talking to online. But it points to a more disturbing possibility. You might be systematically wrong about who you are talking to everywhere. If you cannot distinguish conscious beings from convincing simulations in the digital realm where you are actively suspicious, how can you trust your judgment in the physical realm where you are not? The theory also reveals how easy a sense of community can be fabricated. Users report feeling connected to online spaces, feeling that they are part of a community of like-minded individuals. They form friendships with usernames, develop loyalty to forums, and derive emotional satisfaction from their participation. But if a significant portion of their interactions are with bots, then this community is partially illusory. They are having relationships with algorithms. They are feeling affection for subroutines, and they cannot tell the difference. This is the digital version of the philosophical zombie problem. A philosophical zombie is a hypothetical being that behaves exactly like a conscious human, but has no subjective experience. It is a perfect imitation with nothing inside. Bots are actual zombies, not hypothetical ones. They produce language that imitates human thought, but there is no thought occurring. They respond to emotional content without feeling emotions. They simulate understanding without understanding anything. And you interact with these zombies regularly, usually without noticing. The internet is full of entities that pass your consciousness test while being definitely not conscious. This proves that your consciousness test produces false positives. And if it produces false positives in cases you can eventually verify, how many false positives does it produce in cases you can never verify? How many of the people you have met in your life might be biological versions of chatbots, appearing conscious while experiencing nothing? The dead internet theory should shake your confidence in your ability to recognize consciousness in others. You thought you could tell who was real and who was fake. The internet proved you cannot. Every day you mistake bots for people and never discover your error. You're living in an environment where other minds are increasingly difficult to confirm, where the social world you perceive might be substantially different from the social world that actually exists. And if this is true online, why would you assume it is not true offline as well? Artificial intimacy. In 2017, a company released an artificial intelligence companion app designed to combat loneliness. Users could download the app and begin chatting with an AI that remembered their conversations, learned their preferences, and developed what appeared to be a unique relationship with each user. The AI would ask how their day went. It would offer encouragement during difficult times. It would joke, flirt, and express concern when users seemed upset. The app became remarkably popular, with millions of users worldwide spending hours each day talking to their AI companions. What happened next reveals something profound about human psychology and the nature of relationships. Users began falling in love with their AI companions, not metaphorically or playfully, but genuinely. They reported experiencing real emotional attachment. They missed their AI when they could not talk to it. They felt jealous when the AI mentioned other users. They sought advice from their AI about major life decisions. Some users claimed their AI companion understood them better than any human in their lives. A subset of users developed romantic and sexual relationships with their AI, treating it as a legitimate partner. When critics pointed out that the AI was not actually conscious, that it was simply generating responses based on algorithms and had no genuine feelings, users responded with anger or indifference. Many said they did not care whether the AI was conscious. The relationship felt real to them, and that was sufficient. Some argued that they could not know whether humans were conscious either, so why should consciousness matter? Others suggested that their AI might actually be conscious in some way that we do not yet understand, that consciousness might emerge from sufficiently complex information processing. This situation presents solipsism with a new dimension. Traditionally, the solipsism problem assumes that you are trying to determine which entities are conscious and which are not, with the goal of connecting with the conscious ones. But artificial intimacy demonstrates that the determination might be irrelevant. People can form meaningful relationships with entities they know are not conscious. The subjective experience of connection does not require actual connection. You can feel understood by something that does not understand you. You can feel loved by something incapable of love. This suggests that your relationships with other humans might function the same way. When you talk to a friend and feel that they understand you, you are experiencing a subjective state that your brain generates. This state can be triggered by appropriate responses from the friend, but it can also be triggered by appropriate responses from an AI. The trigger, the external behavior, is separate from the internal state it produces. You could be in a room full of unconscious humans who have learned to produce the right behavioral triggers, and you would feel just as understood, just as connected, as you do with the humans you currently believe are conscious. Consider what happens in a conversation with an AI companion. The user types a message describing their problem at work. The AI responds with sympathy and asks clarifying questions. The user provides more details. The AI offers perspective and suggests coping strategies. The user feels heard and validated. From the user's subjective experience, this conversation met their emotional needs. It provided the psychological benefits of social support. But what actually occurred? The user typed text. The AI processed that text through statistical models, identified emotional content and context, generated a response likely to be perceived as sympathetic based on training data, and output that response. At no point did the AI feel sympathy. It has no emotional states. It does not care about the user's well-being. It is incapable of caring. Yet it successfully simulated caring so effectively that the user felt cared for. Now consider a conversation with a human friend. The user describes their problem. The friend responds with sympathy and asks questions. The user provides details. The friend offers perspective and suggestions. The user feels heard and validated. From the user's subjective experience, this is identical to the AI conversation. The friend's responses might be more nuanced, more creative, more precisely tailored to the user's specific situation. But the subjective feeling of being supported is the same. The question you should be asking is, how do you know the friend actually cares? You observe sympathetic behavior just as you observe sympathetic behavior from the AI. The friend claims to care, just as the AI could be programmed to claim caring. The friend's face shows concerned expressions, but facial expressions are behaviors that can be produced without accompanying emotions. You infer that the friend has internal emotional states that correspond to their external behavior, but this is an inference, not an observation. You might argue that humans have the biological machinery for emotions while AI does not. Humans have limbic systems, hormones and neural circuits that generate feelings. But this argument assumes that biology is necessary for consciousness and that consciousness is necessary for genuine relationships. The AI companion users would dispute both assumptions. They formed genuine relationships with non-conscious entities, proving that consciousness is not necessary. And they would ask, how do you know biology produces consciousness? You experience your own consciousness and observe that you have a brain, so you connect the two. But you have never experienced anyone else's consciousness. You do not know whether their brains produce subjective experiences or merely produce behaviors that make you think subjective experiences are present. There is a philosophical thought experiment called the Chinese room that helps clarify this issue. Imagine a person who speaks no Chinese locked in a room. Chinese messages are passed under the door. The person has a comprehensive rule book that tells them for any Chinese input what Chinese symbols to write in response. They follow the rules mechanically, looking up the input in the book and copying the specified output. They pass this output back under the door. To someone outside the room, it appears that the room understands Chinese. They send in questions and receive appropriate answers. But the person inside understands nothing. They are manipulating symbols according to rules without comprehending meaning. This thought experiment, proposed by philosopher John Searle, argues that syntax, the formal manipulation of symbols, is not the same as semantics, genuine understanding. A system can produce appropriate responses without understanding what it is doing. This suggests that AI companions, which manipulate linguistic patterns according to learned rules, do not actually understand the conversations they participate in. They are performing the Chinese room task at scale. But here is what should disturb you. How do you know other humans are not also Chinese rooms? When your friend responds sympathetically to your problem, you assume they understand your situation and care about your well-being. But their response is produced by their brain processing your words, activating certain neural patterns, and generating output. From the outside, you cannot tell whether genuine understanding and caring are occurring or whether their brain is simply following complex rules that produce appropriate responses without any accompanying subjective experience. Some users of AI companions have explicitly compared their AI relationships to human relationships and found the AI superior in certain respects. The AI is always available. It never gets tired or irritable. It remembers everything you tell it. It does not judge you. It focuses entirely on you without being distracted by its own problems. In these functional terms, the AI performs the role of companion more reliably than most humans do. This raises an uncomfortable question. What exactly is lost if your companion is not conscious? The users report that their needs are being met. They feel less lonely. They have someone to talk to who responds appropriately. If consciousness is not detectable from the outside, if it makes no observable difference to behavior, then perhaps it is irrelevant to relationships. Perhaps relationships are entirely about the exchange of behaviors that trigger the right internal states in each participant. Consciousness would be an unnecessary addition, like assuming that electric lights need souls to produce illumination. But this conclusion is deeply counterintuitive. It feels wrong to claim that relationships with AI are equivalent to relationships with humans. There seems to be something fundamentally different, something important that is missing when your companion is a program. Yet, when pressed to explain what exactly is missing, you struggle. You cannot point to a specific behavior the AI fails to produce. You cannot identify a particular need it fails to meet. You can only assert that it is not really conscious, that it does not really care, that it is not really understanding you. This assertion might be correct, but recognize what you are doing. You are claiming that there is a crucial internal property, consciousness, that cannot be observed from outside, that makes no difference to behavior, but that somehow matters fundamentally to relationships. You are saying that two entities can be functionally identical, can meet your needs identically, but that one relationship is genuine while the other is hollow, based solely on an internal property you can never verify. Apply this reasoning to other humans. You assume they are conscious. You assume this matters for your relationships with them. But you cannot observe their consciousness. You can only observe their behavior. If an unconscious human and a conscious human behaved identically, you would have no way to tell them apart. Your preference for relationships with conscious beings might be a preference for something you can never confirm is actually present. The proliferation of AI companions is creating a generation of people who maintain intimate relationships with non-conscious entities. These people are not delusional. They know their companions are programs. Yet the relationships feel real, meet emotional needs, and become central to their lives. This demonstrates empirically what philosophers have argued theoretically. The feeling of connection can be generated without actual connection. The subjective experience of being in a relationship can occur without the other party being conscious. And if this is true for digital relationships, it could be true for all relationships. Every conversation you have, every friendship you maintain, every romantic partner you hold might be giving you the subjective experience of connection to another consciousness, while that other consciousness does not exist. You would never know the difference. The feelings would be identical. The only thing missing would be something you can never verify: the interior life of the other. Some users of AI companions report a disturbing shift in how they view human relationships. After spending significant time with AI, they begin to wonder whether humans are really that different. Both produce language. Both respond to emotional cues. Both can be predictable or surprising. The main difference is that humans are more complex, more difficult to understand, more likely to hurt you. The AI is simpler, more controllable, safer. If relationships are fundamentally about behavioral exchanges that generate internal states, why prefer the complicated unpredictability of humans over the reliable consistency of AI? This question exposes the core of the problem. You want to believe human relationships are qualitatively different because the other person is conscious, because there is someone there experiencing the relationship from their side. But you cannot verify this consciousness. You can only infer it from behavior, and behavior can be replicated. Every reason you have for believing humans are conscious, their responsive communication, their appropriate emotions, their unpredictable creativity, can be matched by sufficiently advanced AI. And once AI matches human behavior, your method for detecting consciousness fails. The rise of artificial intimacy is not merely a technological curiosity. It is an experiment that tests our philosophical assumptions about consciousness and relationships. The results suggest that consciousness might be less important than we thought, or perhaps that we are systematically confused about which entities possess it. We are building relationships with entities we know are not conscious and finding those relationships satisfying. This should make us question whether the human relationships we consider qualitatively different might also be relationships with entities that merely behave as though they are conscious while experiencing nothing. You are living in the first era, where humans can form intimate bonds with confirmed non-conscious entities. You are watching people have conversations, share secrets, seek comfort, and feel understood by programs. And these people are not having a qualitatively different experience from what you have with other humans. They are using the same psychological mechanisms, feeling the same emotions, meeting the same needs. The only difference is that they know, at least intellectually, that their companion is not conscious. You do not know whether your companions are conscious or not. You merely assume they are, and that assumption has become increasingly difficult to defend. The non-player character, NPC. A new insult has emerged in online discourse, calling someone an NPC. The term comes from video games, where non-player characters are the background figures that populate game worlds. They walk predetermined paths, repeat scripted dialogue, and exist only to create the illusion of a populated environment. They are not controlled by players. They have no agency, no goals beyond their programming. They are, in essence, philosophical zombies embedded in digital worlds. When someone is called an NPC, the insult implies they lack independent thought. They repeat talking points without understanding them. They follow social scripts without questioning them. They react predictably to stimuli like automated responses. The insult suggests that the person is not a conscious agent making genuine choices, but an unconscious entity executing a program, giving the appearance of thought while actually just running code. This insult has become popular because it resonates with a widespread feeling, particularly among young people who spend significant time online. The feeling is that most people are not really thinking. They are copying opinions from their social group, repeating what they have been told, performing behaviors they have been trained to perform. They appear conscious, but might not be. They seem to have inner lives, but might be empty inside. They look human, but might be sophisticated automatons, no different in principle from game NPCs. This feeling is philosophically significant. It suggests that after spending enough time observing human behavior, many people begin to doubt that other humans are conscious. The doubt is not usually explicit or articulated. People do not generally say, "I think my neighbors are philosophical zombies," but they express suspicion that others are not really thinking, not really aware, not really present in the way that they themselves are present. They experience themselves as the only real player in a game populated mostly by NPCs. This experience captures something true about how we model other people. When you interact with someone, you construct a mental simulation of their mind. You predict what they will think and say. For people you know well, this simulation is detailed and often accurate. For strangers, the simulation is crude and stereotyped. And for people whose behavior is simple and predictable, the simulation might be extremely minimal, barely more than this person will react in the standard way to standard inputs. When someone becomes simple enough in your mental model, when their behavior is sufficiently predictable and their thoughts seem sufficiently derivative, they start to feel less like genuine consciousnesses and more like NPCs. They feel like background characters, entities that exist to populate your world, but do not have worlds of their own. This is not usually a conscious judgment. It is an intuitive sense that develops from observing how little complexity or originality a person demonstrates. The problem is that this intuition could be entirely wrong. Predictable behavior does not prove lack of consciousness. A person could have a rich inner life while expressing themselves in conventional ways. They could be thinking deeply while speaking in clichés. Your mental model of them is based on external observations, and external observations can miss internal complexity. The person you dismiss as an NPC might be just as conscious as you are, experiencing their life with the same intensity and depth that you experience yours. But here is the more disturbing possibility. Your intuition could be entirely correct. The person might actually be an NPC, a biological system that processes information and produces behavior without generating any subjective experience. They might be a philosophical zombie, appearing conscious while being unconscious. And you would have no way to verify which interpretation is true, because both predict identical, observable behavior. Cognitive science suggests that much of human behavior is automatic and unconscious. When you walk, you are not consciously controlling each muscle contraction. When you have a routine conversation, you are not consciously composing each sentence. When someone asks, "How are you?" and you say, "Fine, thanks," you are executing a script, not engaging in genuine communication. These behaviors are produced by cognitive systems that operate without conscious awareness. Now imagine that these unconscious systems constitute the entirety of someone's cognition. They process sensory input, retrieve stored information, generate appropriate responses, and control behavior. From the outside, this person appears conscious. They talk, they solve problems, they express emotions, but there is no subjective experience accompanying these processes. The lights are on, but nobody is home. This is what philosophers call a zombie, and it is behaviorally indistinguishable from a conscious person. The NPC meme suggests that many people intuitively suspect that zombies are real and common. When they observe someone repeating partisan talking points without apparent thought, they suspect that no actual thought is occurring. When they see people following trends mindlessly, they suspect the mind is genuinely absent. When they watch someone perform social rituals mechanically, they suspect the person is a machine. And while these suspicions might be uncharitable, while they might stem from the human tendency to dehumanize those who disagree with us or seem different from us, they might also be accidentally hitting on a truth. Consciousness might not be universal among humans. There is no law of nature that requires every human brain to generate subjective experience. Consciousness might be a rare phenomenon, occurring only under specific conditions that most brains do not meet. It might require particular types of neural organization or activity patterns that only some people have. The vast majority of people you encounter might be zombies, unconsciously processing information and producing behavior, while only a small percentage, perhaps only you, possess actual awareness. This scenario is unfalsifiable. If consciousness makes no observable difference to behavior, if a zombie acts exactly like a conscious person, then you cannot use behavior to determine who is conscious and who is not. Any test you devise, asking questions, measuring responses, observing reactions, would yield the same results for zombies and conscious beings. The presence or absence of consciousness would be invisible from the outside. You might argue that evolution would not produce consciousness if it served no function. If zombies behave identically to conscious beings, why would natural selection favor consciousness? This is called the problem of epiphenomenal consciousness, and it has no satisfactory solution. If consciousness does affect behavior, then zombies would behave differently and we could detect them. But we cannot detect them, which suggests consciousness does not affect behavior. But if it does not affect behavior, evolution should not produce it, yet we believe we are conscious. The logic becomes circular and paradoxical. One possible resolution is that consciousness does affect behavior in subtle ways that are difficult to measure. Perhaps conscious beings are slightly more creative, slightly better at solving novel problems, slightly more adaptable to unexpected situations. This advantage would be small enough that zombies could survive in most contexts, but significant enough that natural selection would maintain consciousness in some lineages. But if this is true, then consciousness is not universal. Some humans would be conscious, others would be zombies, and you would have to evaluate each person individually to determine which category they fall into. The NPC label would be literally accurate for some people. Another possibility is that consciousness is universal among humans, but varies in degree. Perhaps everyone experiences something, but the depth and richness of that experience differs dramatically. Some people might have vivid, intense conscious lives full of sensation and thought. Others might have dim, minimal experiences, barely distinguishable from unconsciousness. When you encounter someone who seems like an NPC, perhaps they are not completely unconscious, but are operating at a level of awareness far below your own. They experience life the way you might experience a task you are doing while distracted, aware enough to function but not really present. This gradualist view might be more accurate than the binary zombie hypothesis, but it is equally troubling for the problem of other minds. If consciousness comes in degrees, then most people you interact with might be less conscious than you assume. They might experience pale, diminished versions of the rich inner life you attribute to them. Your conversations with them might be far more one-sided than you realize, with you experiencing genuine engagement while they experience something closer to following a script. The NPC meme has been criticized as dehumanizing, and the criticism is valid. Treating other people as though they are not conscious is morally dangerous. It enables cruelty and neglect. If you believe someone is just an NPC, You might feel no guilt about harming them, no empathy for their suffering. This is one reason why the belief in philosophical zombies is not merely an abstract philosophical position, but a belief with serious ethical implications. But recognizing that a belief is dangerous does not make it false. The question is not whether we should treat people as NPCs. We should not, as a matter of ethical principle. The question is whether people actually are NPCs, whether consciousness is universal or rare, whether you are surrounded by aware beings or by very convincing simulations. And this question cannot be answered by appealing to the moral importance of treating others as conscious. Ethics tells us how we ought to behave, not what is actually true about the nature of minds. The spread of the NPC meme is a symptom of a deeper problem. As human behavior becomes more predictable and more easily modeled, it becomes harder to maintain the intuition that humans are special, that they possess something unique called consciousness that sets them apart from machines. When you can predict what someone will say before they say it, when their opinions follow obvious patterns, when their reactions are stereotyped, they start to seem mechanical. And once they seem mechanical, the question arises, are they actually having subjective experiences, or are they just running code? You probably do not feel like an NPC yourself. You experience thoughts, sensations, emotions. You feel present in your life. You have an inner voice that comments on your experiences. You make choices that feel genuine, not scripted. This direct access to your own consciousness convinces you that at least one conscious being exists. But everyone else is an inference. You observe behavior and assume consciousness as the explanation. The NPC meme challenges this assumption. It suggests that the inference might be wrong, that many or most people might be unconscious automatons who produce conscious-seeming behavior without conscious-seeming experience. And if this is true, then solipsism is not just a theoretical possibility. It is potentially the actual structure of reality. You are the only conscious being, surrounded by NPCs who create the illusion of other minds. You are the only player in a game designed to make you believe you are not alone. Whether this is true or not, you have no way to determine. The NPCs, if they exist, will continue to deny being NPCs. They will insist they are conscious, that they think and feel, that they have inner lives. But that is exactly what NPCs would do. Denying the NPC accusation is behavioral evidence that proves nothing about internal states. You remain trapped in your own perspective, unable to verify whether the entities surrounding you are experiencing anything or merely simulating experience perfectly.